Well, Commissioner, could I have you introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. My name is Haladay. I am currently serving my 4th year as a Helena City Commissioner.
Very good. What do you do for a living?
As my full-time job, I work as an associate attorney at the Drake Law Firm here in Helena.
And how long have you lived in Helena now?
Since 2010, so 7 years.
And was this last election the first time that you ran for elected office?
It was.
Okay, very good. So, Commissioner, why are you running for another term?
Sure. So we can build on our successes. We've had some good achievements over the last 4 years. We have long-term plans for our infrastructure, stormwater, water, wastewater. For the first time, Helena has a dedicated fund to rebuild failed streets, to redo big transportation issues like mini malfunction junction and malfunction junction. We can build sidewalks for safe routes to schools and other non-motorized projects. We can do all of these because we've planned out how to do rates equitably so that Helena residents can continue to receive the services they expect and get them improved on. We've also got long-term plans for economic development in the Railroad District, long-term plans for downtown Helena. We've seen successes with our 2-route bus system. We've seen successes with our curbside recycling programs. I want to keep building on these successes, and that's why I'm running again. I have the most experience of everyone in this race in putting together the budget, the policy, and the legal aspects so that we get the policies and programs that we want, because I understand how they all tie together.
Very good. What do you think is going to be the #1 issue facing Helena going forward into the next 4 years?
I think probably continued economic development in our core districts is going to be so important, because that is how Helena gets its money, is through the taxable value of those properties. And so that's what funds our critical services, our police, our firefighters, our parks department. And so by investing in these areas and upping the value of them, we get more tax revenue, which means we can do things like hire extra firefighters, hire extra policemen. That's how we have to do it now, because the way that the Montana legislature has passed bills over the last few decades, we can't simply raise taxes for that, so we have to be smart. We have to develop correctly, and it's gonna be really important that you have a commission that's thinking about these things, that's doing these long-term plans for this economic development, enticing businesses to come and stay in our downtown in order to keep funding these services, both at the levels they're at and expanding on them.
Well, you've addressed it a little bit in this last response, but how satisfied are you with the level of services that the city is providing right now, and do you think there's room to be improved there?
So it really depends on which areas of services you're talking about. When it comes to things like streets, water, wastewater, stormwater, we can always improve. The good news is that we have the funds available and the funding capacity available to keep improving in those areas. Where Helena struggles more are areas of services like our parks and recreation, our police, and our firefighters. What we need to do is continue to build our taxable value, because our budget is maxed out when it comes to mill levies, which means we have to be very careful with how we're spending dollars and careful as to how we're raising dollars. You know, in my time, we were going to get rid of one police position that was working in the schools. I made sure we kept that full-time position so that we could put that person out on car patrol. With regard to firefighters, Helena has been running a 6 firefighter shift minimum since around 2009. That's too low for a city our size. Thanks to the work of myself and Commissioners Noonan and Ferris Olson, we upped that staffing to a 7 firefighter minimum this last budget round. Is that enough? No, we need to do more. And that's an area that needs to be focused on for increasing. What it probably means is going to be asking the residents of Helena whether they want to support a fire service levy in the next year in order to make sure we can maintain that level of service, that we don't fall back below it, and that we can provide even better service.
Another thing that I think you've sort of addressed, but what do you see as your biggest accomplishment in office so far?
I would probably say really making sure that we have these 5-year plans for infrastructure going forward. They weren't there, and the way that rates were being increased on homeowners wasn't fair. We were charging people too much for what they were getting in return. Now that we can see exactly what's being paid for, and I can tell people exactly what they're paying for, I think we've really changed the way residents pay for things and what they're getting in return. And I really think that the roads program is probably one of our best accomplishments. The fact that we now have a source of money to pay for things like, how do we fix transportation into the railroad district? How do we deal with the transportation issues at Mini Malfunction Junction? How do we start tackling $26 million of failed streets? There was no plan for that until 2 years ago. And now, are we gonna finish it all overnight? We can't do that. But we absolutely have the ability to really start tackling that and taking a bite out of it. And that's what I said I wanted to do 4 years ago when I got on here, was begin to think about long-term goals. Focus on today's issues, but also think about how we pay for things, how do we develop right, so that in 5, 10, 15 years, we continue to have the Helena that we love.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you haven't accomplished yet that you want to work on over the next 4 years?
Sure. 2 big things that come to mind are a tax increment financing district for downtown. It's probably the best tool that we have for economic development as a city. It allows us to work on public infrastructure, it allows public-private partnerships, it allows loan and grant programs to businesses. It's a really great way to work on overall areas and focus on larger development issues. They take time, they take lots of thinking and lots of planning. It's right up my alley, but we need to work on that, and it's just getting off the ground in its nascent stages right now. The other that I'd like to see us do is working on affordable housing. And affordable housing is more than just rentals. I see it as at least a 3-prong strategy. The first is rentals, and we've got the Helena Housing Authority, but they've had long-term plans for quite some years now, and they need help. And doing what we can as a city to provide financial support for them is one thing, but we also need to consider partnering with external entities in the state. Other cities have had great successes in dedicated affordable housing. This is real rentals, real buildings that actually go ahead and rent long-term low-income, not just private development that says that it has low-income housing. We also need to focus on affordability for new homeowners, and that means working with groups like Habitat for Humanity. That means considering things like land trusts. That means potential city donation of those lands that lock in costs so that people who are around that median income in Helena are able to afford homes. We're fortunate that Helena hasn't reached a point where it is as expensive as some of its peer cities in western Montana, but boy, we are still behind the curve on making sure that we have these long-term plans for how we keep this city affordable. The last piece would be programs to assist homeowners. A really simple example would be your wastewater pipes or your water pipes. Those coming into your house, if they fail, that can be a $15,000 investment for a resident who is not prepared to pay for that. That's a lot of money, even for a white-collar professional who is well above the median income for the area. How the city works with its existing residents to make sure that their homes and their lives remain affordable is so important. And so putting those 3 strategies together are good for Helena's residents, it's good for our future. It's also great for our businesses, because we need to make sure that our community remains affordable for the individuals who we want to work in it. We've got government, we've got quasi-governmental services, and we've got private sector, and we need to make sure that anybody working in those areas can afford to live in Helena if they want to.
What do you think is working well in Helena government right now, and what do you think can be improved?
Sure. I think we do really well at a lot of our core responsibilities of again, taking care of our water systems, taking care of our wastewater systems, planning for our streets. I think our Parks Department does an absolutely fantastic job, given the limited budget constraints, given the budget constraints that they face in, year over year, constantly looking for improvements and innovation. And anyone who's lived in Helena, even for the last decade, has seen myriad improvements in our parks and trails systems throughout the city. There's a couple of things we could definitely work on. We touched on a couple earlier with making sure that we can keep funding and expand funding for essential services like police and fire. We need to make sure that people who want to develop in some of the trickier parts of town, old buildings, repurposing buildings like the old Independent Record Building or the old Blue Cross Blue Shield buildings, feel like it's worth their time and effort, because that's a lot of work. You've got code issues, you've got an old building that needs to be retrofitted. Sometimes it's easier to just say, let's develop farther and farther out. So the city needs to say, if you're gonna meet us there and do this kind of good development, bring in jobs into our core, we're ready to work with you and roll up our sleeves, and we wanna say yes to all of your proposals, not throw up barriers or be a problem.
From a philosophical point of view, what do you think the role of the Helena city government ought to be?
Wow, that's a broad question. The role of the government is multifaceted. At its core, the government provides basic essential services that touch you every day, picks up your garbage, brings you clean water, takes away your dirty water, provides you essential safety services, your clean parks, your open spaces. But more than that, why do we choose to live in cities? Right? We choose to live in cities because they provide us with community and goods and things that make us want to live together. And we have these shared goods, and we pay taxes for these shared goods. So more than just our basics, our cities are providing us that sense of community. That means sometimes a city takes a position on legislation that's going to affect the city in the long term. That means sometimes the city takes a position on a contested issue. Take a non-discrimination ordinance, where a city is saying not just our basic services, but that all of our residents deserve to have the same treatment, that all of our residents deserve to feel welcome. Sometimes that means the city takes a position on moral leadership. Sometimes that means the city takes a position on issues of conservation. And sometimes people think, well, those aren't within the purview of a city commission. Well, they absolutely are. And even if your only interest is purely money and your tax bill, those absolutely come back and can save you money in the long run. And we've seen that result. The city of Helena managed to reduce its water consumption through conservationist water techniques, tiered water rates. And what that did was reduce the amount of water the city of Helena used, which means it reduced the amount of money that residents paid in that same period of time. That's a perfect way to marry conservationist beliefs with economic beliefs. And so the city has such a broader role than just a very limited provision of services.
I know that you are running as part of a slate along with Mr. Collins and along with Ms. O'Loughlin. What is the shared agenda that you guys are running on?
Sure. I think you've heard all of us speak of a better development focus for our downtown. I think you've heard all of us speak about affordable housing. Those are critical issues. And again, I think they all come back into how are we going to provide more money for essential services. When you put those pieces together, they're part of that puzzle that makes Helena that better place to live, and also a place that generates more taxable money, more economic development for people. Does that mean we'll agree on everything? No, who does? But it's been wonderful to work alongside and get to know those two individuals on these issues.
Very good. Well, my last question then is, what message do you want to leave voters with as they make their decision?
Sure. I think we've had a great 4 years. I understand what this city needs. I understand the programs and policies that are necessary for Helena. And with my background as an attorney, with my years of experience on this commission now, I know best on this group of candidates of how to actually accomplish those goals. And I think that the track record so far in our areas of infrastructure, in our areas of economic development policies, in our work for the bus system, in our work on recycling, all merit another 4 years, and I really appreciate the opportunity to serve again.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.